The Old Man and the Black Water. Written by Kevin Strange, read by Danny Hicks. The old man sipped his hooch angrily, stomping across the gnarled, red-stained porch. The old man's daughter dropped the heavy box she'd been carrying. Its contents rattled violently.
"Dad, for real, we have to go."
Her husband and her two young children hurried with boxes of their own down the rock path that led to the driveway. They were careful not to step on the black water puddling and oozing its way towards the house.
"Careful with that china now. It was your grands,"
the old man said, taking a large swallow of his home-brewed liquor. His daughter huffed and stomped away. There had been much huffing and stomping in the 72 hours since the Mississippi River spontaneously began spewing that slimy, unidentified black liquid. All across the riverbed, but particularly in Hobbs Hollow, due to its immediate proximity to the river, chaos and mass panic erupted, but not at first. Local officials, led by a red-faced, fat-bellied sheriff named Paul Jones, first mistaking the substance as oil, attempted to trace the eruption from its source. The geyser formed just off Lookout Point, the marina, which sat Hobbs Hollow's southernmost tip, at 5:15 a.m. on Friday, June 17th, 2012. The old man, Dale Mitchell, to the townfolk, had risen early, as always, and was among the first to notice the dark sludge issuing from the muddy river. Sheriff Jones showed up at the Mitchell residence at 7:45 a.m. with a hazmat team. He asked and received permission from Dale to use the property as a staging ground for their operation due to its location as the closest to the riverbank, even having a dock in the backyard with which to launch their boat. Chrissy Mitchell, Dale's daughter, walked back to the porch, obviously having collected herself.
"Dad, come on. We've got almost all the essentials. We can be back on the road in the next 10 minutes.
"Pistachios and parsnip," Dale said, never taking his eyes off the black tide rising towards his home.
"What?"
Chrissy asked, puzzled. "Final two ingredients, my hooch. Stuff I never told you about. Stuff makes it so sweet." He finished off his cup, poured himself another. Chrissy stared at him in amazement that quickly turned to anger.
"Why would you tell me that? You've kept that recipe a secret for..." "Dad, you are not staying here. Get your ass up in that truck. We're leaving now."
At 9:15 a.m. on Friday, two divers jumped into the river just outside of the growing pool of darkness that had begun to emanate from around the geyser. At noon on Saturday, they were declared missing and presumed dead. At approximately the same time, the lab in charge of identifying the strange liquid returned their results on the black substance as unknown and potentially hazardous. The dark water by this time had reached the shoreline, completely overtaking the natural body of water from horizon to horizon.
"Ain't leaving. Ain't no black water gonna scare me off."
Dale shifted his brown and green camo John Deere hat to keep the morning sun out of his eyes.
"Dad, you know what's going on out there. You've seen those things with your own eyes. You can't..."
"Unbelievable!" "What's wrong?" Chrissy's slim-figured husband yelled from inside the U-Haul.
"He won't leave. This stubborn old bastard wants to die here."
At 2:15 p.m. on Saturday, as the first local news team set up to film the peculiar river anomaly, which had now driven its black tendrils past the docks, over the marina, and up onto the very edge of Dale's property, one of the divers surfaced. The news crew immediately went live, asking the bewildered man what happened. How had he survived underwater with 1 hour of oxygen for over 24 hours?
My God,
He said to the 10 million viewers across the country affixed to their TV sets, all wondering what was happening in the Midwest.
it was like another world. So beautiful. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I don't know how to describe what I saw. It was where I was. It was so beautiful.
He began to cry.
They sent me back with a message. Death isn't the end. There's nothing to fear. There's something unimaginable waiting for us on the other side. It's the water bringing it here to us. It's just that I'm sorry. I can't say anything more.
By 10 p.m. that night, the main interstate highways into Illinois that led to Hobbs Hollow were jammed bumper to bumper for miles as people from across the country piled into the little community, wanting their own glimpse of what some were calling the rapture, and others called the 21st century Mecca.
Dad, we're leaving.
Chrissy was crying. The kids were in the truck, her husband behind the wheel. He honked the horn, motioning her to hurry up.
What can I do to make you come with us?
Dale was staring thoughtfully at the creeping liquid, lapping at the porch steps, meters away from his boots.
Nothing, sweetheart. You get those kids out of here. Far away, you hear me? Away from any large bodies of water. No lakes, ponds, especially no rivers. How much bottled water you got in that truck?
Enough for a few days.
Well, that'd be plenty of time to find some more. You got that hooch, too. Don't give none of that to them boys. Between you and Vern, you'll be fine.
Chrissy looked back at the truck.
You know we won't, Dad.
Nonsense.
Now, Vern's a good man. He'll take care of you.
Dale did his best to sound convincing. Did his best to lie.
There'll be plenty of other people trying to survive out there. You just get as far inland as you can. And you? What are you going to do, Dad? I reckon I'll make my way up to the roof if I have to. I don't think it'll come to that, but if it does, I'll be fine up there. I can't see this thing lasting more than a couple of days, more a week at the most.
He never was a good liar. Chrissy broke out in a sob.
Daddy, please.
She knelt beside the ancient rocking chair.
I don't want to do this without you.
Dale knocked on his prosthetic leg.
Won't do nothing but slow you down, kiddo. I done had my time, lived my life.
He pushed a strand of hair out of his daughter's face and looked her in the eyes for the first time since the water began to rise.
If there's any life out there left to live, well, you just go on and live it.
By 3 p.m., Sunday, June 19th, the town of 12,000 held 35,000 within its borders, and more jammed up 100 miles across the tri-state area. Vast revival tents had been erected in the night. Religious hymns and songs of worship, both live and recorded, boomed from the new shoreline 3 blocks into the business district. Men, women, children waded into the dike core. Sermons were preached as dozens of members of this new congregation were baptized in the black water before swimming off into the deep, before disappearing into the inky depths. At 11 p.m., while doing his 4th consecutive interview that day, the resurrected diver, recovering peacefully in a local hospital, began to vomit copious amounts of vile, smelling black water. 550 million viewers were tuned into the live news feed broadcast from Hobbs Hollow News Channel 6 when the diver, with wild, terrified eyes, grabbed the cameraman and pulled him close.
It's a goddamn lie! He screamed between drive heaves, ropes of black gunk pouring from his nose and mouth. Something intelligence took over my body, forcing my consciousness into submission. I've only been able to watch in horror as it spilled out these wild stories to you people. Stay out of the water! Stop drinking it, for Christ's sakes! They need our bodies. They use the water as sort of a conduit to our brains. They don't have physical bodies like us. They vibrate at different frequencies, but they mean us harm. They mean to destroy us. This is an invasion! Just then, the slime issuing from his mouth congealed into several bands or ropes of snake-like appendages, rendering speech impossible. He shook uncontrollably for several seconds before his eyes rolled into the back of his head, and he attacked the throng of curious onlookers drawn to his bed by his lunatic rantings. 3 police officers shot him dead after he rushed them, wildly swinging his IV stand, mumbling incoherently through his tentacle mouth. "There comes a point in every man's life," Dale said, "when he gets his routine all set, when the idea of changing that routine is just too much to bear." He wiped the tears from Chrissy's face. "I've been in that routine so long I can't remember a time when I wasn't. And the thought of moving out of this house my grandpa built with his bare hands, well, let's just say I'd rather take my chance with whatever's in that water, baby girl. Now go on. Your family's waiting for you." As if in answer, her husband honked again. "I love you, Daddy." "I love you too, Pumpkin." At 3:30 p.m. on Sunday, Sheriff Jones called the governor personally to ask him to declare a state of emergency at Hicks. That's when he learned that the black water was no longer isolated to his little community, that geysers had sprung up in every major body around the world an hour before. There were no available National Guard troops to deploy to Hicks. There would be no FEMA to rescue. The world had its own black water problem now. They were on their own. Mass chaos erupted through the town. After witnessing the divers' rampage on television, a lynch mob formed and attacked the throng of black water worshippers who had declared themselves the Anointed Ones. Hundreds died. Thousands were maimed, trampled, and left for dead as the multitude of human bodies drove, pushed, and stomped their way out of town like a flock of petrified geese fleeing the first sound of a shotgun. The relentless tide pushed forward 10 blocks deep into the residential part of town. The part of town now utterly abandoned. Only the floating bodies and abandoned vehicles told the story of what happened at Hops Hollow. At 5:15 a.m. on Monday, June 20th, as Chrissy and her family drove away through the 2 solid feet of black water, the sleepy little town of 12,000 had been reduced to one tired old man sipping his home-brewed alcohol. After they were out of sight, Dale reached into his pocket and pulled out his Colt .38. By the time he got around to loading the gun, it was well past 6 p.m., and he was good and drunk. The water had risen steadily throughout the day. Dark shapes occasionally surfaced where Lookout Point once stood. Angry shapes. Shapes making noises he'd never heard in his 74 years. Noise that he was pretty sure no one had ever heard before. He finished off the last of his hooch as the water lapped at his chest. Careful to keep the gun from getting wet, he cocked the hammer back, placed the barrel to his temple, thought of Chrissy's beautiful, smiling face
one last time.